It's great to be alive and love. Good morning, sun.
And good morning to you. What is today? I don't even know what day it is. Wednesday. Ah, March 3rd. Very nice. Okay. So I'm a little tired this morning. So bear with me. I already had one failed streaming start and had to cancel it and figure out how to delete it all. Okay. So let's start with a sip of coffee. Okay. And here we go. So today I wanted to talk about some Business Central news and updates, catch up on just stuff that I'm trying to keep track of. There is so much going on and I want to look at all of it, but I just can't keep up. So these are a few highlights of things that I've paid attention to or noticed. I don't always have the time to follow up on them and try them and learn them in detail, but I think they're pretty cool, so I thought I would share. So with that, okay. So in the context of this, I do have a blog post that I maintain called the BC Resources List. It is on my blog at blog.stevendo.com, I think, but I've created a bit.ly link, bit.ly/BC Resources, and that'll take you right to the blog post on my blog, which has the links to BC Information Resources. And looks like as of February 26th, I had 209. And so when I learn about something else or someone sends me something else, I update it. So I'm trying to keep it actively updated. And it is a long list, but I try to break things out into sections, and it is a potentially good starting place if you're looking for something or, you're new to Business Central and you want to know where to look for stuff and learn. So with that, next up, I have contemplated, so my BC Resources list page is more for kind of static resources, Microsoft Docs, Microsoft Learn, etc., and then Twitter accounts and YouTube channels and blogs and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of there is a need to kind of keep track of what's going on a daily or weekly basis, whether that's tweets or blog posts or Microsoft articles or announcements or whatever the case is, just a constant stream of information. And so I created this blog domain. I registered the domain and created this blogger blog as a placeholder. And the thought was that I would set up Power Automate flows to grab feeds from various sources and pull them in as digests, like daily digests of activity. So, for instance, every morning I get an email with the Business Central forum posts for the last day. So if there were 10 forum posts that were added during the last day, I'll just get those in a nice email digest. I can just scan them in one email, and if any seem relevant or if I understand what any of them might be, I'll go look at them and see if I can answer them. So that's the concept that I'm thinking with here, that this will collect a bunch of stuff throughout the day, and it'll do a blog post saying, okay, here are some forum posts, here are some articles, here are some tweets, and it'll kind of automatically capture that and post those on a daily basis. And then you can subscribe to the RSS feed for this site, and you can then consume that at whatever pace you want and get an email or whatever. So that was the concept. I haven't had time to figure out how to get Power Automate to pull the different sources and what those sources might be. And, it's just a time thing. But I think it's technically possible. I just haven't been able to work on it yet. So that's the idea. However, there are other people working on this as well. But if this is of interest, let me know. I did chat with a couple of people who were interested in helping. I just haven't had time to pursue this. So that's one idea. But with that said, related note, DynamicsCon Conference is coming up March 16th through 18th, just a couple weeks away. And that is a free user community conference, crowdsource sessions, crowdsource speakers. And one of these speakers is Jeremy Viska, and he is going to cover, his session is going to cover, I believe, lots of information, like how do you deal with all the information and where do you get information on Business Central. And so he's pursuing the same concept. And I believe he is also on the side working on some type of way to assemble this information. So similar to my idea of Business Central updates. So I'm eager to see his session at the DynamicsCon Conference. And then in the next couple weeks, he's starting a new venture of Spare-Brained Ideas. That's a new company he's starting. And I believe he is going to work on how to compile all this information. So multiple people are looking to do this, and I think it's just a matter of time and figuring out the best technical solution to try to pull all that together. Okay, with that, make sure to register for DynamicsCon. It is free. Great sessions. These sessions will be available after the conference on YouTube, but it'll be a fun time. Next up, if you aren't following Yun Chu on Twitter, definitely follow him. He has some fantastic blog posts at his blog at yzhums.com. Very well curated, detailed blog posts. They're fantastic and they're nice and granular, focusing on a specific topic. They are step-by-step with instructions and screenshots and even little demo videos. So excellent blog content, really very high quality stuff. So hats off to him. If you've ever written blog posts, you know it can be a fair amount of work, and having them super well formatted and detailed and all the examples takes a lot of time. So he's written a few interesting ones lately. One is the duration data type. I've actually used that I forget what I was doing. I was testing creating a text file, seeing how long it would take to do certain operations while creating a text file. So duration data type is really neat. He has a blog post on that. Has a blog post on item substitution in Business Central. So if an item is out of stock, what are some alternative items you could offer? And he also did a neat blog post on recording user permissions or recording permissions for permission sets in Business Central. So rather than having to figure out all of the objects and what permissions you might need on those objects, you can create a permission set. You can hit the start button, click on different windows, perform operations, whether it's insert, delete, modify. And then when you hit stop, it has recorded all of the permissions that say a user would need in order to perform those operations on those windows in Business Central. So really neat feature. And I know from the Dynamics GP world, no one was eager to figure out the permissions. It was just a hassle and really complex, and managing them was a nightmare. And when you couldn't access a window, it's like, okay, why? You have to have a tool to figure out why you can't get to that window. What's the security issue? So this looks really neat. I don't know if there are limitations, but looks like a neat alternative. One moment. Sorry, had to do some homeschooling interruption there. Okay, so definitely check out his blog, follow him on Twitter, and check out those things. He has a lot of neat, very topical blog posts. Okay, so next up, Stefan Maron over in Germany. He has moved his blog to his own domain, stefanmaron.com. And so check out his blog. He is now posting new posts there regularly. And he has a couple projects going on. One is a GitHub repository that I think I've mentioned in a prior video. Excuse me. msdyn365bc.code.history. And he has pulled together I believe, every release of the Business Central source code from Microsoft's Git repo. He pulls it in, and that allows you to do a diff or see the diff or do a git blame and see what changes were made to every single AL file. And this is pretty cool. So I have looked at the BC API pages to see what changes were made on, say, the vendors API page or the items API page. And I can see, they changed a few lines, they deprecated this, they added this, and there's a comment in there. And so you can see down to the specific release level what changes have occurred lately. So that's very neat. And I suspect we're going to leverage that more in order to be aware of changes that are being made to the Business Central code, because not everything makes it into release notes. It's really hard to know, thousands of files, what changed and what is a breaking change. So I'm looking forward to how people utilize this and the interesting ways that we can use that to improve our CI/CD pipelines, our testing, things like that. And so I'm looking into this to know if I create, say I create a copy of the vendor API page and I add the US 1099 vendor fields to that for a customer. Well, now I have a disconnected copy of the Business Central API page. So if Microsoft makes changes to the vendor API page, my page is going to be instantly out of date, my custom vendor API page. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I know when there are changes to the vendor API page, the base version, so that I can update mine, issue a new release, and have all the new properties and fields and whatever supported in my custom API page, so I don't drift. That's my goal with my first project, potentially using his repository. And he has a new video series, How Do I, where he looks at very granular, simple tasks. How do I create a table? How do I create a flow field? And so you can subscribe to him on YouTube and get him over the 100 subscriber mark so that he can get a custom YouTube URL. So definitely check out Stefan. Saurav is continuing to do the BC Open discussions. If you haven't attended, I highly recommend them. It's a great casual discussion where he, when you register, you can register on his webpage, on his blog at this URL, and you can ask questions or suggest topics specific to something you're running into or something you're curious about, and he will actually discuss them during the Saturday call. Now, I know Saturday doesn't work for some people. It happens to work pretty well for me. I make some coffee, and at 8 a.m. I join the session. And that will change, I think, based on daylight savings and where you're at. But it's 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern in the U.S., and 9:30 p.m. Indian time on Saturdays. So highly recommend it. It's great discussion, lots of different topics, and Saurav has full code samples. He records the session and then later posts it to YouTube in case you can't make it. And he did based on one of the open discussions, he did a video and a blog post on the list data type. I'm familiar with lists from .NET, but I believe it's relatively new to AL, so it's very cool data type. I use it all the time in .NET, so check out his blog post. Oh, my big head's in the way. There you go. AL back to basics. But check out his blog, sauravdhyani.com, and you can get to that article on the list data type. Waldo. So if you haven't seen it, I did a live stream session with Waldo, and it was essentially a lightweight BC code review, asking him a few questions about his thoughts on really basic AL coding patterns, like when should I create a separate procedure? How should I name that procedure? And, do we need to worry about overloading or multiple signatures? And then let's see, procedure naming, variable naming, how you should incorporate certain things in a test and maybe design. So asked him a few questions and talked about the handled equals true dilemma that can occur with ISV solutions that can essentially disable some events. So it was a fun discussion, and that is up on YouTube on my channel. And he recently did a blog post on his waldo.be blog that shows how to get a list of all APIs that are available in a Business Central environment. And so you can retrieve the resources and endpoints from a standard BC API listing, but that won't tell you what custom APIs exist in a given environment. So he talks about how to query all of those API endpoints, even if they're custom, and know about any custom endpoints that exist. So that was a neat article. Okay, so Stephen Renders had a tweet showing an error that he was encountering with a student's Docker environment. And I've run into this once. And the error will be like this random indecipherable error that you're just like, what is going on? And so the thing to look for in this particular type of errors, and there are many different variants of this, unfortunately, is the word HCS shim. And so you'll see an error, encountered an error during HCS shim, and then in this case it's system start context deadline exceeded. And there are many different variants of this, like insufficient resources or something allocated, and it won't make any sense. And my interpretation from seeing this on several errors and encountering this myself is it relates to Docker, the base Docker engine trying to start up. It can be insufficient RAM, insufficient disk space, or in my case, it was a Windows version mismatch. I was on an older version of Windows because my Windows update was failing because one update was stuck. And because of that stuck update, Windows was unable to apply or download subsequent updates. So I was on a really old version, and I got some random HCS shim error. And in this case, it's context deadline exceeded. And the recommendation that Freddie had for me, if I was unable to resolve my Windows version issue, was to try isolation Hyper-V, or it looks like isolation process as an alternative. And I don't know exactly what the difference is between those two options on the new BC container helper, but in this case, Stephen was able to get it resolved with isolation Hyper-V. And so I think that's the newer option for isolation. That has to do with how the Docker starts up the container. So anyway, if you see the HCS shim message, check your Windows version and see if you have a version mismatch with the Docker image, and you can try isolation Hyper-V. I consider the isolation Hyper-V to kind of be a duct tape, fix, kind of an interim measure, and that there's likely some underlying issue that you could potentially resolve to get rid of it. But that's my interpretation so far of what's going on with HCS shim Docker errors. BC Telemetry. I've been wanting for months and months to dig into BC Telemetry. I just haven't had the time. I've dealing with other learning. But if you don't follow Kenny Naibo Pontopadon on Twitter, I hope I got that right. He tweets a lot and shares a lot about BC Telemetry, application insights, and Kusto queries. And he shared a LinkedIn article, Learning Dynamics 365 Business Central Telemetry in a Week. So I'd really like to check that out and go through that series and just finally dig into it and learn it. So it's something we're all going to need to learn, kind of like Business Central testing, automated testing. So if you have time, check it out, Telemetry, for two reasons for me. Telemetry for just diagnostic and debugging and performance analysis, but also when I work in the .NET world, I usually have detailed logging, detailed extensive logging. And I'm wondering whether telemetry is going to replace that. I don't know. Telemetry can help you track certain events, certain errors, certain problem conditions, but I don't know that it's the place for detailed debug logging and like just, hey, all of these 357 events just happen. They're not like critical events, but I'm going to save that log for future analysis. I do that all the time with the .NET applications, and I'm wondering whether telemetry is the place for that, application insights, or whether there's a different way to store that in a given BC environment or tenant and have that logged locally in that customer's environment. I don't yet know. Store it to a table. Is there a way to store log files essentially, or the equivalent? I've asked on Twitter a couple of times and really haven't received much feedback. So I don't know if it's a thing in Business Central, but I'm going to make it a thing. Okay, next up, Erik Hougaard. Of course, if you don't follow him on Twitter, do so. Tons of information coming from Erik, including lots of videos and blog posts where he focuses on specific topics and does nice, short, very focused videos digging into those topics. One recent one is sessions and tasks, page background tasks. And I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but it looks very interesting. So I want to look into this to see how you can have a page with a page background task performing something to keep that page refreshed and current is my understanding. So very cool stuff. Next up, Kristen Hausman, fellow Business Central MVP, pointed out an issue. I think it's an issue. I agree with her on this, with the vendor statistics. So if you open up the vendor card in Business Central, pull up a vendor and open up the info pane or fact box, you'll see some vendor statistics like this. And one of those is payments. So if you create payments for a vendor, this number will get larger. So let's say you have 10 payments to a vendor for $1,000. If you then void one of those payments and void a $100 payment, you would think that the vendor would have been paid $900, right? You sent them $1,000, you voided 100. Well, that payment never occurred or was voided, so you have paid them $900. This payments field here will not change. It will still show all the payments, all $1,000, including the voided payment. So this is on the Ideas site, and it has been there, I think, since 2019. Someone pointed this out, and Microsoft had just shrugged. It's like, that's nice, but we don't consider it a problem. We don't consider it a bug. It's not on our roadmap, but maybe if you get a bunch of votes, we'll take a look at it and consider it. So for whatever reason, they don't consider it a bug. Kind of strange. Voided payments, I don't think should be considered. And what's fun is when you void the payment and then you issue a new payment to deal with that void. Let's say the vendor never received it, the EFT didn't go through, whatever. Well, you issue another $100 payment. This payments field will show $1,100. So it's just like, not only is it not considering the void, but it's showing the second payment. So it really starts to get out of control if you have a lot of voids. So I poked around and I looked at why this was occurring, and I found the query, and it's like, yep, there's your problem. And I just kind of did a quick hack to see if I could adjust it. And I created this payments to field on the fact box, and I was able to eliminate the voids. It wasn't just as a test. I probably didn't do it the proper method. It's a little more complex than you would think, but I just did a test to see if I could do it, and I was able to do it, but it requires a fair amount of thought and design, I think, to do it properly. So Kristen and I are going to try to do a live stream, I think this Friday, to just walk through why the problem exists and how to potentially solve it. I don't have the correct solution, but I'll just show an example of how it might be done in theory. Okay, and last up, Microsoft made an announcement, I believe, as part of Ignite, and that they would support Yubikeys with Azure Active Directory going forward. So this is a kind of like a PR blog post from Yubikey announcing that it is now supported with Azure Active Directory. And in case you are not familiar with Yubikeys, this is what one looks like. Focus there. Okay, so this is a USB Yubikey. You put this in a USB port, and when you're prompted to authenticate via browser, the browser, only supported browsers, only browsers that support the FIDO protocol, they will prompt you to touch this little metal circle to authenticate, and that kind of electrical conduction will close the circuit, and that will perform some type of super fancy cryptographic authentication, and you will log in. And they also have USB-C versions of this. There we go. They have a Lightning port version of this. Now, I bought the USB-C version to try to use with my iPad Pro, and I think it might work now, but very, very limited support on Safari. So for desktop browsers, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, I think they all support it on Windows at least. I don't know about Mac, but that's what they are. I found these seem kind of cool. They're probably pretty secure, but they are a bit of a hassle. So when you're prompted, you got to dig your keys out or find where this thing is. You got to plug it into your PC. You have to authenticate, and if you lose this, you got to reset it up. So it's a little bit of a hassle. I personally find the smartphone authenticators like Google Auth and Microsoft Authenticator to be more convenient. But it was pointed out to me on Twitter that there are entire groups of people working at companies who literally have no smartphone. That had just simply not occurred to me. And so someone pointed out that some of their customers had no smartphone, so they had to use Yubikeys for authentication. And okay, that makes sense. And then there are also situations where employees cannot, I don't know what the legal situation is like. Employers cannot make employees have company smartphones for authentication. And so the employees are refusing to carry the company phone, something like that. And so they won't have an authenticator on a mobile app or on their personal device. So the YubiKey is an alternative to that. So anyway, with phishing and authentication issues, YubiKey is a pretty secure option, but it is a little bit of a physical hassle to deal with. Not a big deal. It's pretty convenient, but it's just if I had a choice, I'd go for my smartphone. And with that, have a good Wednesday, enjoy, and let me know how you're dealing with this just massive flood of information coming out of the Business Central world, and how you're not only consuming the information, but keeping up. I'm struggling to keep up with the information, but following up on some of this stuff, watching the videos, reading the blog posts, doing tests on prototype with code to try to, learn this stuff. It's just really challenging. I just don't have enough time. So if you have any great suggestions, let me know. Anyway, have a good one, and go out there and learn something and have fun. Okay.
Good morning, sun. How